Well, once again I vowed to do something different. The last three times Monique and I sat here waiting for 6 o'clock to go, and right when 6 o'clock went, we put in the numbers and found out that I had failed.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. So I told Monique months ago, I'm just going to give you the numbers and I'm going to get on my shoes and walk down to 31 flavors and have a scoop of strawberry and a scoop of pistachio.
There
And
you
I'm not
go.
even going to think about it. Right. And so I did that. I just left and I wasn't even going to look. I go, when Monique finally got home, she goes, "Did you find out?" I went, "No." She goes, "Everybody's waiting to hear from you." I said, "Yes." "Well, I already went down and got my ice cream and I'm not looking. That's what I'm doing different." So then I gave her the card and she went over to her computer and she brought it up and she goes, "You passed." And I said, "Baloney, not true." She goes, "Well, look at what it says here." So I got up and I looked, and sure enough, I passed. And I have to tell you, it was such a relief that I started crying. It was just a spontaneous, I'm a big, tough guy, but I can still cry. And it was just such a relief to have passed that it brought that out, that emotional response.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hanging Out with a Successful Bar Exam Taker. This is going to be fun. I just said before we started, I can't wait to do this interview. And with me today is a successful California bar exam taker. Yes, you heard that right. And his name is Randy Delling. Hey, Randy, how are you?
I'm great.
Yeah, I bet you are. I bet you are. Now, you and I talked a whole lot of times while you were studying. I never saw you in a suit and tie, so I am really impressed today. You're looking very sharp. Must be that new being a member of the bar thing, right?
I wanted to look lawyerly, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we have a lot to talk about today because you used a lot of the tools and techniques that we teach. You came to us having already taken the exam unsuccessfully, and I want to kind of walk through that story. You've been kind enough to share with me, and now I'm asking you to share it with our audience. But the reason I want to do it is because I think you are a great example of what can happen even under tough circumstances. In addition to being really one of my favorite students, frankly, from the July exam. So let's kind of start back at the beginning. Why don't you share with the audience today how you came to be in a position to take the Cal Bar originally?
Okay, well, I was a high school principal in Los Angeles Unified, and that's a very busy job. And I went to law school in my last 4 years as a high school principal. So, in my view, my law education, while I respect it and think it was very good, it had the limitations of the time that I had to put into it. So I came into the bar exam right away, I believed, in a deficit with quite a bit to learn, and especially about the bar exam itself. But that didn't stop me. As you know, I'm pretty fearless, probably because I don't know any better. But I just signed up to take the exam, and I started right away with Kaplan. And I went through the entire Kaplan program, and I was not successful the first time. So then, Kaplan's free second time, went through Kaplan again, raised my score, but not successful. So then the third time, I hired what I call a fire and brimstone coach, pretty much like a drill sergeant, who was very much Iraq, 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 which my school was Iraq, 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 and so was Kaplan, and so is Barbary. In this one, I vowed to do something different every single time. So I did Barbary, and I went through the entire Barbary program, which was heavily Iraq. I really wasn't having that much trouble with the MBE, but my writing was not ever accepted in law school at all. My professors never liked my writing. And obviously, the first three times I took the bar, the graders didn't like my writing either because that's where I suffered. All three times by studying, I did improve my knowledge. I did improve my ability to recall the law, but I did not improve my writing. I improved my scores overall because the MBE kept going up. And the third time, the MBE went up dramatically. And that's what the Fire and Brimstone coach did for me, really increased my MBE. So then in the idea of doing something different every time, trying to adhere to Einstein's theory of insanity, right? Doing something over and over again and expecting a different result, I always have done something different since the second time. And so I found Celebration. Actually, Monique, my girlfriend, found Celebration, and it looked good to me. And so I signed up because I liked the approach. I liked what was being said. It was very much in line with the brain research that all educators know about, and it was also very much in line with just general education, period. And so I signed up, and uh, then we changed now from Iraq to
FLA, yeah.
FLA, and as you remember, that was an extremely difficult transition for me, even though it fits my style
Mm-hmm.
of looking at these things much, much better. And now I'm so happy that I did do that because during this final exam that I took, I was able to adhere to the FLA style, fact, law, analysis, all the way through. And here I am successful finally. It's just a much better way to write. And then also the component in Celebration of what is good writing. I think that was really important at the end, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where we went into that mode of let's talk about what good writing is in general.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned on a bunch of lights in my head, along with the FLA style and my very joyous abandonment of Iraq in favor of FLA. And I'm so happy that it was successful. And I actually deem it to be the main reason. I don't think I did that much better on the MBE the fourth time. We'll never know, of course, but I did an extraordinary job on the MBE in the third test. And when we were practicing with your materials, I got 165 correct on the practice test. So
Yeah.
that's a monster score on the MBE. And if I did that, I will say, as the email I sent to you right after the test, this MBE seemed to me to be the most difficult one of all.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually made me angry for a while. During the test, I had to walk out in the afternoon session twice just to calm myself down so that I wasn't distracted anymore by that anger. It was extremely distracting because I found all of the problems to be very difficult. There weren't any easy fluff problems in this exam from my point of view. Sometimes you'll have 10 really tough ones, and then you'll have 3, really easy ones where you already know the answer when you read the first sentence. This exam, in my view, was not like that, even though I was monstrously prepared, the best prepared I've ever been.
Yeah, and we're going to dig a little deeper into that in just a minute. But one thing I think to keep in mind for our audience, if you don't know, the pass rate for repeat bar takers in California in July 2017 was 28%. When you get up to a third, fourth, fifth try, statistically, you've got about a 5% chance of passing. Right. So one of the things that you did, Randy, that I thought was so wise was to recognize that continuing to do the same thing over and over again wasn't going to change your result in any meaningful way. Now, there's a huge bias in favor of using issue spotting and IRAC style writing. And, there are a lot of haters out there, a lot of trolls that say, oh, if you don't do that, you can't pass. Well, I love it when we get to talk to somebody who can say, no, actually, that's not true. You did the FLA style. You used the making arguments rather than trying to recite rules and law. And it gave you a better sense of the problems, better opportunity to write. And certainly in practice, your writing was more than sufficient. And as it turns out on the exam, it was as well. So that's got to be a good feeling for you, is just sort of knowing, yeah, I could modify and change. From your experience in education that how people learn is pretty important, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you and I spent a long time in our conferences. You were in our personal coaching program, and we spent a lot of time during those conferences talking about the process of learning. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like when you've been learning how to do something for a few years and you're kind of locked into that, how you make that shift in your thinking to do new things, and what kind of things you had to do internally to make that happen?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to be open to the idea of listening to others. You have to listen to all kinds of things. One of the first things I saw was your video about the 5 different groups that'll never pass the bar. And knowing that I was actually in 3 of those groups while I was going through law school, you know, that pointed out to me, you better open up your mind and open up what you're hearing, because you're in 3 of these groups. You're no longer in them because you're retired now and you have some advantages, but it definitely had uh, an effect, a negative effect in my view, on my performance on the bar exam. To be in those groups, the reasoning for those groups that you have was very true to me. I also have to say that the extra mile study group
Hmm.
is extremely helpful.
Yeah,
There was that young lady from Florida who was already an attorney.
right.
And in that group, she said, when we were talking about changing from Iraq to FLA,
Hmm.
she said, yes, when I go into court, the judge just wants us to do facts, law, and analysis. That's it. They're
Yeah,
not sitting there going, what are the issues? They want to know what the facts are. And that had a profound effect on my thinking right there, which is part of the listening, right? Listening to
yeah,
others.
yeah,
Because I'm
absolutely.
65, I'll be 66 in 2 weeks. And what is she, 27? And she's
Hmm.
already an attorney,
Yeah,
but it's never mattered to me. I've always found that my students teach me as much as I teach them, right? And so
yeah.
listening to all the people struggling in the support group brought my thinking around, allowed me to listen more, and keep an open mind, because what I was doing obviously wasn't going to work. And I have to tell you, quite honestly, I've never liked the Iraq style. It's just not my style. Period.
Yeah.
I'm not Shemerinsky. It's not going to be that way. I don't have the total recall that that gentleman has. I totally respect him for it, but that's not my style. And when you get back to the modalities of learning, right, that's not my modality. Period.
Right, right. And
Um,
I think it's important to recognize that. And I think, for those of you that don't know, part of what Randy's talking about here is that we have a Facebook group called The Extra Mile for our registered students, and we offer group coaching calls and opportunities to support. And I know you're still on the group as a now successful bar taker, as many of our past students are, which is an incredible resource, and we're very grateful for you being there and others being in that situation. So that's really a big deal to get that assistance as well as the work we're doing. Now, you
yeah.
mentioned being open minded, and one of the things that you did that was very open minded in this particular situation was to incorporate the use of photo reading. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I was just talking with Monique on our walk this morning about how I walk around now with all of these little minute details that are really helpful on a bar exam that I never would have retained before. I was extremely skeptical of photo reading. I didn't even start it until almost the very end of our study,
Mm-hmm.
but it became so unbelievably effective for me right away, especially during the training when we finally got to, I think, the 5th day and we did that dictionary exercise. And
Yeah.
I was able to actually pinpoint where all of these words were out of the dictionary on the page, on the correct page. It just was amazing. And then I just blew through so much materials because I'm the kind of guy, as a principal, as a teacher, as an assistant principal, I've always believed in getting your students what they need. And so I was able to, because I have lots of resources, buy all sorts of stuff. Like I said, I bought Kaplan, I bought Barbary, I bought Celebration, I bought during law school so many supplementary materials. It was insane to help me understand what my textbooks couldn't really get across to me. I had wide access to other resources. And so I think that's an important piece of this, in that when I started photo reading all of that stuff, holy smoke, did my knowledge that I'm retaining and able and have access to, right? That's the main thing. you photo read, and then when you're finished, you relax and you say, I will have access to all this information. Well, guess what? I did. Because when I got into that test, like I wrote to you in that email right after the test, the stuff was just flying off my fingers. Whereas before, I was in a total panic. The first three bar exams on almost every single thing, I was like, oh my God, how do I start this? Oh my God, what am I going to say? Oh my God, what's the law? Oh my God, what are even the issues? I don't even remember what these are. But with this, the facts are right in front of you. It's kind of like, I was really strong on the PTs, right?
Hmm.
Because the facts are right there. The law's right there. I don't have to make anything up. Well, now all of a sudden, because of photo reading, I don't have to make anything up. It's just flying literally off my fingers. And I was a typing teacher and a computer teacher, so that's 115 words a minute, just flying right off my fingers, not even having to think because I had total access to, to all the information. And I didn't just read the Barbary stuff, and I didn't just read the Kaplan stuff and just the celebration stuff. I read all the stuff, everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even
Which
my
you
old,
could not have done with traditional reading. It would have been impossible, right?
it would have been impossible to put all that knowledge in. And so now I walk around all the time with these little minute details that I'm telling you, I never could have retained. And now even today, I'm still retaining it. I mean,
Yeah.
in one of the extra mile study groups, they asked me how I was doing. And it was toward the end of our study. And I said, well, compared to what I did before, I feel like I've been on vacation.
Yeah.
This is a very steady, right along with the brain research. And what I mean by that is that the brain research tells us that if you take things in little chunks and then go take breaks, and then come back in little chunks and go take breaks, that you retain much more than you do trying to cram or stay up all night and do it all at once. It's just not an effective way to learn. That's not the way our brains learn. And so this program is all about that. You even told me after one of my first, when I finally wrote a successful essay for you, you said, okay, go do something nice for yourself now. And I took my paddleboard out and went paddleboarding in the harbor.
Yeah, just
So,
to get this clear, folks, a 65-year-old guy goes out and he paddleboards in the harbor in Southern California. I mean, really? Okay. So,
well,
yeah.
I'm going wakeboarding Saturday. So,
Okay, well, even better, I guess. I don't know. I don't understand that at all. Perfectly good water, perfectly good sharks. The I think that what photo reading seemed to do for you was to give you a burst of confidence. As you say, you started relatively late into your studies using photo reading, but you saw almost immediately the improvement. You started getting a lot of your practice MBEs correct, even though you had a really good base in MBE. You were getting just extraordinary results, really. You recall that, and then in the writing, it was exactly what you described. You were able to start putting so much more on the paper that really was germane to the problem. And I saw your essays kind of expanding into a much stronger, more fluent piece of writing. So photo reading is a tool that's helpful on every part of the exam. Would you agree?
I would agree absolutely, and I would also say that I'm highly confident that photo reading is going to be extremely helpful to me in practice also.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not the do all end all, but it is very, very good, and it allows you to retain much more information. Part of that is because you actually spend more time with the text, but you spend the time with the text in a different way that I feel is much more effective,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to retention and especially when it comes to recall.
Yeah. And I think your point about stepped repetition versus memorization, as an educator, that when you ask people to memorize, it's very short term and it's very minimal gain. But when someone's repeating material and adding new material and repeating and adding, they come to know it and have ownership of the material. And that's
Right.
where you see the biggest differences. So, I think it was really, for me, it was a lot of fun to work with another teacher because you got that. I mean, I didn't have to explain it to you. It was like, yeah, I got this. I understand what you're talking about. That's spaced repetition. Holy moly, I love it. The guy can speak
Right.
my language. So
And I used
that was
to
cool.
always in the first day with my students for all the 12 years that I was actually a teacher, the first day I did a stepped memory exercise with them where I would show them a complex drawing for a whole minute and have them draw it. And then I would show them a similar complex drawing for 6 seconds at a time and have them draw it 10 times. And, inevitably, the first one that you draw is lacking, and the last one that you draw is almost complete.
Yeah.
And so it's a very clear demonstration of not only how your program works, because your program works that way, but also how photo reading works once you do the skittering and the, other
Right, the activation techniques. That's right.
right, the activation techniques that go along with photo reading. So, for me, it was extremely effective. I would highly recommend it, and I would believe that anybody that it was not successful for probably wasn't really following the training the way they ought to.
Yeah.
It really, here I am. That's all I can say. Here I am. And I attribute it not only to the stepped learning process in Celebration Bar Review that you talk about immediately for people that start off, but also for photo reading. It's very much that way because you don't just photo read. The next thing you do is, relax and tell your mind to make it available to you, and then you go into the other types of activation activities like you said.
Yeah, that's awesome. Unfortunately, there are people that are sort of in the flat Earth society, and they're going to stand on the shore and say, "You got to issue, spot, and memorize," and then they keep taking the exam and keep failing the exam. And it's really sad to see that happen. And that's why I wanted you to be able to share your story, because it's so counter to all of that I think people can say, "Oh wow," you know. Not so much if this guy can do it, because you've got quite a background. I mean, you were a Marine. You haven't even talked about that. You're a surfer. You're a former principal. You're an educator. You went to law school. I mean, you've been a successful guy. It had to be hard on you to take the bar after all those successes, to take the bar and not be successful. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that felt at that point in your life?
Yeah, I'm most of the time a positive person, as you well know. There are moments like when they didn't change the score for California. I was
Yeah,
down in the dumps for a
yeah,
moment there.
yeah,
When I didn't pass the bar exam all three times, I was down in the dumps for a moment there, and that's literally what it takes. Monique will tell you, anything that gets me down in the dumps is literally for one moment. That's all it takes, and then the next thing I did literally 5 minutes after I found out I didn't pass each time, got on the bar website, signed up for the next exam, and
yeah,
went looking for my next change to get prepared. I always looked at this as okay, it's devastating that you didn't pass. It's crushing. Uh, no more so than crushing in law school when I went, to college for 30 straight years. I was a college student for 30 years to get to where I am.
right.
For 26 of those years, I was a 4.0 plus student, straight A's on everything. Then I start law school. For the first 3 months in law school, I failed every single thing. Everything was an F. There's a jaw dropper for you.
Yeah,
You're like, whoa, what the? And I'm going to really have to step it up.
yeah,
And so that was my whole mindset for the whole 6 years, 4 years of law school and 2 years on the bar exam. It was always, and as you know, I always said, well, it's not the bar examiners, it's not the bar exam, it's me.
right.
It's my education is lacking. I was too busy to really get it, and I need to improve. I need to improve. And so I'm going to set about the work of improving. And that was always my mindset. So, yes, it's devastating to hear you didn't pass, and I understand that. And I'm unique in that devastation never lasts very long for me, literally not much more than a moment,
Yeah,
because it's not productive and it doesn't
right,
feel good.
right,
And so the next thing I always say is, okay, what do I have to do?
right. You're an action
What do I
guy.
have to do
Yeah,
to stomp this into the ground?
yeah, right. I love that. Yeah, you were on the phone with me like the day the results came out. Like, boom, okay, we're ready to roll. Um, well, let's talk for a minute about this change in the cut score, because it was really hard on you, and it's a big deal. For those that don't know, the cut score is the passing score, and in California, that score is 1440, which would be a 144 on the multi-state, 144 written if you're trying to equate it. So the second highest cut score in the country after Delaware, who knows why. but clearly the one with the most impact. And there was a proposal before the bar and the state Supreme Court to lower the cut score. And I had anticipated they would not do that. It turned out, unfortunately, I was right. They decided not to do it. The state Supreme Court said nope. And you got that information, and it was hard for you. Results had not yet come out. We just knew that instead of 1440, instead of maybe a 1400, or they coming up with some weird number like 1413 or something, but it was going to still be at 1440. So what did that feel like for you? What was that response, at that moment for you?
Well, I felt, since the MBE was the toughest of the four that I had taken, I really at that point felt, okay, look, realistically, you've never really scored over 1375. You never really even got into the second read. And so, statistically, you didn't pass. You just might as well face it. And since all my friends and everybody's been asking me for years, have you passed yet? And I have potential clients, I mean, literally hundreds of them, that call me all the time. Did you pass yet? Did you pass yet? It was devastating. And I thought, okay, you're going to be taking the February exam, start getting ready. And, I wrote you and said, should I start getting ready?
And what did I say?
And you wrote back and said, hang on, here's what this is what it's going to cost you to do that. And, hang on. And I replied with, well, I know what needs to be done. Right. And so yeah. I actually did start back in.
I know you did.
Because I have all the materials, right?
Right.
I've got everything I need. And I just didn't spend any money this time because I had everything. But I did feel that I needed to brush up a little bit. And, that's how I felt. So it was really, and I have to say that I was surprised that I passed. It was a surprise.
To you,
I told everybody
to you, it was a surprise.
Yes, to me, it was a surprise. I told everybody at the beginning, before I even took it, I'm not making any guarantees. I've already not been successful 3 times. I know what that's like. And it's very possible that I was not successful this time. So, I was surprised, but I was pleasantly surprised that I passed. And I think really the reasons for it have to do with continued improvement on the MBE and massive improvement from IRAC to FLA, period. FLA is a much better style. And for anybody who's doubtful, I challenge you to go into the bar site itself, look at the passing answers, as many of them as you can, and look for the FLA style, because it's there.
Yeah, it's
a
there.
lot.
Yeah.
You don't see I recognized it. We talked about it, right? This is one of your guys. I can tell. This is one of your guys, successful. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I would be surprised, but I would be pleasantly surprised again to see one of my essays up there for this exam.
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I honestly think it could be. I mean, and to get the scope of this, again, for our audience, what Randy's saying is he didn't make a second read in any of those 3 tries. His score went up by at least 70 points. I mean,
that's correct. Yes.
I mean, that's a jaw dropper.
I already had a 1470 on the MBE.
Right. So it had to. It's like, oh man.
Or 1370 or something like that.
Right. Okay. So I mean, so when you think about a 70-point jump, you're like, huh? Now, I thought you were going to pass, and that's why I hung back. I felt like you had been doing the work and you knew it. And yet I know that this wait in California is so incredibly long. It's the last jurisdiction to come out with results. It just draws out and drags out and drags out. And so here we are right before Thanksgiving, and you're just finally getting your results, and everybody else has been working for a couple months, and it's just crazy. What was it like when you saw the results? Can you just share that moment?
Well, I vowed to do something different. The last 3 times, Monique and I sat here waiting for 6 o'clock to go. And right when 6 o'clock went, we put in the numbers and found out that I had failed.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. So I told Monique months ago, I'm just going to give you the numbers, and I'm going to get on my shoes and walk down to 31 flavors and have a scoop of strawberry and a scoop of pistachio. And I'm not even going to think about it, right? And so I did that. I just left, and I wasn't even gonna look. I go, when Monique finally got home, she goes, "Did you find out?" I went, "No." She goes, "Everybody's waiting to hear from you." I said, "Yes." "Well, I already went down and got my ice cream, and I'm not looking. That's what I'm doing different." So then I gave her the card, and she went over to her computer and she brought it up, and she goes, "You passed." And I said, "Baloney, not true." She goes, "Well, look at what it says here." So I got up and I looked, and sure enough, I passed. And I have to tell you, it was such a relief that I started crying. It was just a spontaneous, I'm a big, tough guy, but I can still cry. And it was just such a relief to have passed that it brought that out, that emotional response. It didn't last a whole lot of time, just like being devastated doesn't last a whole long time. But that's what happened. That's
That's
how.
awesome. That's
And that
awesome.
was like at 9 o'clock. It was like 3 hours later. So that's why nobody got to know, because you guys were already in bed
Yeah, it's way after my
when I
bedtime here on
found
the East
out.
Coast.
And
That's right.
I'm sure everybody thought that I had failed, and that's why you hadn't heard from me. But I had just vowed that every single time I was going to do something different.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did that was different.
Well, you
That's how
did
I found
everything.
out.
Yeah, you did everything different this time, and it all worked for you. And I'm so
Yeah.
pleased for you, so excited. And so many opportunities ahead for you. You've done so much in your life already. We thank you for your service as a Marine. I thank you as an educator and a parent for your work. Yeah,
Actually, I was Army, but that's
Army.
okay.
I'm so sorry. You're Army.
Don't be sorry. It's all right.
Okay. I
Not a
still
problem. I
appreciate your
have nothing
service.
against Marines.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, I got that. Okay, so you're in the Army. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I thank you for your service as an educator, for a teacher in the classroom, as well as being an administrator and a principal. And I think you're going to be a terrific member of the bar because you're bringing all of those skills together: the personal touch, the desire to help people. You've been just a delight to work with, and I can see already you're helping our current crop of students and encouraging them. I mean, that's just you. That you're just that guy. You're a teacher, and so that's wonderful. Anything else you want to share with our audience today? I mean, we've gone a little bit longer, but I just thought your story was so good. I just wanted to get it all out there.
Well, I would just say that the entire program of celebration demonstrates caring, which is something that's really important. It's more about education than it is just about bar review. It also has components about your personal life and balancing, study with recreation, which is so important to the brain research about how we learn. And then, finally at the very end, going into this idea of what is good writing, which the other reviews don't do.
Yeah.
That's just Iraq, Iraq, Iraq with them. And this is FLA and what is good writing. I just think that, if you're on the fence about celebration, get off the fence and jump in. You won't be sad that you did. And compared to the other study that I did, and especially under my fire and brimstone coach that I had for the third one, Celebration Bar Review was like a vacation, and it was a successful vacation because here I am ready to get sworn in on December 5th in Ventura.
Well, congratulations. That'll be awesome. I
Thank
hope you
you.
send us a picture of that swearing in. That'll be
I will, and
a
I'm
great.
also going to apply for the federal court in the Central District of California. So
Great.
I'll be able to practice in the state courts and in the federal court of Central District
That's great.
where need be.
Awesome. Well, listen, I know you've got a lot to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. We're thankful to have had you in the course and as a student. Very, very pleased for you, and certainly want to speak for our entire audience when I say congratulations to you again. Well, that's it
Thank
for
you,
today.
and thank you
Yeah.
to everybody at Celebration. You guys are great. Just very supportive, great education. Way to go.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Have a great time. We'll be back again in our next interview shortly. And again, bye-bye for now.